I returned home early and found my ex-wife slowly dying of thirst in her chair. My daughter had just posted a photo in Paris with the caption, "Finally, a break from the pathetic old folks." I grabbed my phone. One call. 15 minutes later, 107 missed calls from her. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you are listening in the comments. The storms had chased me out of Colorado 3 days early. My hands ached from gripping the steering wheel through 11 hours of highway, and my eyes felt like someone had rubbed sand into them. I pulled into the driveway just after 4 in the afternoon, already planning the hot shower and the cold beer I'd earned. The front door was unlocked. That registered somewhere in the back of my tired mind, a small wrongness I almost ignored. Cora always locked up. I pushed inside, fishing gear still dangling from my shoulder, and the smell hit me. Stale air, something sour underneath. The kind of odor that comes from a house closed up too long without ventilation. Then I heard it, a low moan, barely human, coming from the living room. I dropped everything. The tackle box hit the tile with a crash that I didn't hear because I was already moving, my heart suddenly hammering against my ribs. The living room was dim, curtains half drawn, and there by the window sat Blanche in her wheelchair, slumped forward like a puppet with cut strings. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. The water bowl beside her chair sat bone dry, residue rings marking the inside where liquid had evaporated over days. Days. The tray table held a plate of food so old it had crusted over, and her clothing, I had to force myself to look, was soiled and stuck to her skin. "Blanche, Blanche, can you hear me?" My voice came out steady, that prosecutor tone I'd used in courtrooms for 30 years, even as my hands shook checking her pulse. Weak but there. Her eyelids fluttered but didn't open. My phone was in my hand before I'd consciously decided to call. While waiting for 911 to connect, something clicked in my brain, that old instinct from decades of building cases. I pulled out my phone camera and started documenting the empty water bowl, the full refrigerator near her care station, stocked with everything she needed, untouched, the pressure sores visible on her arms. The timestamp on my photos would matter later. 911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance at 4247 Desert Willow Drive in Scottsdale. My ex-wife is severely dehydrated and unresponsive. She's been neglected for multiple days. The paramedics arrived in 12 minutes. I watched their faces shift from professional concern to something harder as they assessed her. The younger one, a woman with efficient hands, started an IV while her partner photographed the scene with the same care I'd used minutes before. How long has she been alone like this? When did you last see someone caring for her? I kept my voice level. My daughter's been staying here. She was supposed to be watching her mother while I was away. I came back early. They worked fast, asking questions I answered automatically while part of my mind spun through other calculations. Where was Cora? She'd texted me 4 days ago saying everything was fine. I'd called her twice since then. Brief conversations where she'd sounded normal, maybe a little distracted. Had she been here then? Or had she been lying? At the hospital, they rushed Blanche straight back. I stood in the ER waiting area, still in my fishing clothes, filling out paperwork with hands that had finally stopped shaking. A doctor found me an hour later, a thin man with gray at his temples and eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Gordon, I need you to understand the severity. Your ex-wife has stage 2 pressure ulcers and dangerous dehydration. This didn't happen overnight. We're talking 4, maybe 5 days of complete neglect. Where was her caregiver?" The question landed like an accusation. I met his gaze without flinching. "That's what I'm trying to find out. My daughter isn't answering." I'd tried calling Cora 7 times by then. 7 calls to voicemail. Each one made my jaw clench tighter. A nurse approached, her voice gentler than the doctor's had been. "We're required to report cases like this. Adult Protective Services will want to speak with you." I nodded slowly. "I understand. I'll tell them everything I know." But I didn't know anything yet. That was the problem gnawing at my gut. I sat in the waiting room under fluorescent lights that made everything look corpse pale and pulled out the small notebook I'd carried in my jacket pocket for decades. Same type I'd used for case notes. My pen moved across the page automatically. Times, observations, questions that needed answers. June 15th, 4:17 p.m. Arrived home early. Found Blanche unresponsive. Estimated 4 to 5 days neglect, per medical assessment. Cora last confirmed present, June 10th, phone call. Cora not answering phone, 7 attempts, food stocked but unused, deliberate neglect. I stared at my phone screen, at Cora's name and my recent calls with all those red mist connection icons. My daughter, the woman I'd supported for 3 years while she supposedly cared for her mother. The woman who'd moved into my house rent-free, who'd cried about how hard it was being a caregiver, who'd guilted me into covering her expenses because she was sacrificing so much. Where the hell was she? My finger hovered over the social media app. I hadn't checked Cora's posts in months. She'd complained once that I was stalking her, so I'd stopped. But now I opened it and typed her name into the search bar. The screen loaded. I stared at the first result. Then I tapped it. The photos loaded one by one on my phone screen, each image a small detonation in my chest. Cora standing in front of the Eiffel Tower, June 11th. Cora and Troy at some Parisian cafe with wine glasses raised, June 12th. Cora holding shopping bags with designer logos, June 13th. Today was June 15th. She'd been in Paris for 5 days. The caption on the Eiffel Tower post stopped my breath. Finally, a break from those miserable old people. I read it 3 times. Then I started scrolling, screenshotting everything with mechanical precision. My prosecutor brain kicked into that old rhythm. Document, preserve, timestamp, verify. I zoomed in on backgrounds, checking for metadata, noting the expensive restaurants, the luxury hotel visible in one photo's reflection. This wasn't a cheap trip. This was thousands of dollars spent while Blanche rotted in my living room. I pulled out my calendar app. I'd left for Colorado on June 8th. I'd been scheduled to return tomorrow, June 16th. Cora had left on June 10th, 2 days after I departed. The medical team said Blanche had been neglected for 4 to 5 days. The math was perfect. Too perfect. Cora had known my return date. She'd calculated down to the day when she could leave, how long she could stay away, when I'd be back to discover Blanche before anything became fatal. She'd gambled with her mother's life on a timeline. A nurse approached, pulling me from the cold fury building in my skull. "Mr. Gordon, your ex-wife is stable now. We're moving her to ICU for monitoring. You can see her once she's settled." "Thank you." The words came out flat. "What's the long-term prognosis?" "Too early to say definitively, but the kidney function is concerning. We'll know more in 24 hours. She'll need extended care regardless. Weeks possibly. Weeks in the hospital, months of recovery, more expenses, all because my daughter wanted a Parisian vacation." I walked to the parking lot, needing air that didn't smell like antiseptic. The evening sun blazed orange across the desert sky, heat still radiating off the asphalt in waves. I found my old leather address book in the glove compartment, the one I'd kept since my federal prosecutor days, filled with contacts I'd thought I'd never need again. Curtis Morrison, defense attorney now, but we'd worked opposite sides on elder abuse cases years ago. He'd been good, thorough, exactly what I needed. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Curtis Morrison." "Curtis, it's Alan Gordon." A pause. Alan Gordon? It's been, 4 years since you retired? What's going on?" I kept my voice flat and cold. "Curtis, I need to consult with you about an elder neglect case. Tomorrow morning, as early as you can meet. I'll pay your rush rate." His tone shifted, that lawyer instinct sensing blood in the water. "This isn't just any case, is it? This is personal. My daughter left her invalid mother without care for almost a week while she vacationed in Paris. My ex-wife nearly died in my living room, and I just found out they've been using me for years. So yes, Curtis, this is personal, but I want it handled legally, properly, and completely. I want every option Arizona law gives me." Silence on the line. Then, "I'll clear my morning, 8 a.m. at my office. Bring documentation of everything. Medical records, timeline, expenses. Alan, are you sure about this?" I watched a family cross the parking lot toward the ER entrance. A father carrying a crying child. Normal people with normal problems. I spent 30 years prosecuting people who exploited the vulnerable, I'm sure. 8 a.m., I'll have coffee ready. I ended the call and opened my notes app, fingers moving fast across the screen. What I knew, what I could prove, what legal mechanisms existed in Arizona for situations exactly like this. Guardianship revocation, financial exploitation claims, adult protective services investigations, possible criminal charges if the DA wanted to pursue them. The pieces were there. I just needed to assemble them correctly. By the time they let me into the ICU, night had fallen completely. The room was dim, machines beeping softly, Blanche's chest rising and falling under sterile white sheets. Someone had cleaned her up, brushed her hair. She looked small in that hospital bed, fragile in a way that made my throat tight. I sat in the chair beside her and took her hand gently. Her fingers were cool, an IV line taped to the back of her hand. We'd been divorced for 8 years, but I'd never stopped caring whether she lived or died. Apparently our daughter had. The window behind her bed reflected my face back at me, harder than it had been this morning, something flinty in the eyes that I recognized from old courtroom days. That look I'd get when I knew I had a defendant cold and was just waiting to spring the trap. My phone screen glowed with Curtis's contact info, and tomorrow's appointment confirmed, 8 a.m. Cora had calculated I'd come home just in time. She was right about the timing. She was wrong about everything else. I spent June 16th making sure Blanche was stable and organizing every piece of evidence into a system that would have made my old paralegal proud. By the time I arrived at Curtis Morrison's office the next morning, I had a manila folder that could end careers. Curtis's building sat in downtown Phoenix, all glass and steel reflecting the early sun. I took the elevator to the 7th floor, that old courtroom calm settling over me like a familiar coat. His receptionist recognized my name immediately. "Mr. Gordon, Curtis is expecting you, conference room B." He stood when I entered, older than I remembered but still sharp in the eyes. We shook hands, and I placed the folder on the polished table between us. "Show me what you have." I spread it out methodically. Medical intake forms listing dehydration and pressure ulcers, photographs of the empty water bowl, each image time-stamped. Screenshots from social media, Cora smiling at the Eiffel Tower on June 11th, the caption reading, "Finally a break from those miserable old people." Bank statements showing $1,800 transferred monthly for 3 years, labeled care expenses. A timeline I'd constructed showing exactly when everyone was where. Curtis studied the Paris Post for a long time. Finally a break from miserable old people. She actually posted this while her mother was... He looked up. "Alan, this isn't just neglect. This is calculating. I need to know every legal option. Eviction, how fast can it happen?" He pulled a yellow legal pad toward him and started sketching. "Arizona is landlord-friendly. 30-day notice to quit. No cause needed when there's no written lease. They've been living there under what premise? They moved in 3 years ago, said they'd care for Blanche since she had the stroke. I agreed because I thought someone responsible was watching her. I own the house outright. They've never paid rent." Curtis made notes, his pen moving in quick, efficient strokes. "So, they positioned themselves as caregivers to secure free housing and a valuable Scottsdale property. Were you paying them?" $1,800 monthly for care expenses, which apparently funded Paris vacations. He nodded slowly, drawing arrows between points on his pad. "The guardianship should be straightforward given the emergency contact designation and the documented neglect. The eviction is even simpler. You're the sole owner, they have no lease, and they violated the implicit care agreement." He paused. "Alan, are you certain you want to do this? She's your daughter." I met his eyes without hesitation. "She left a defenseless woman to die of thirst. Being my daughter doesn't give her immunity from consequences." The meeting took 3 hours. Curtis pulled up statutes, made calls to the courthouse, drafted documents while I watched. There were forms to sign: guardianship petition, eviction notice, medical power of attorney. My signature stayed steady on each one. Afterward, I drove to my Scottsdale house. First time since finding Blanche. I needed to see what I'd been paying for. The living room still smelled stale. Blanche's wheelchair sat empty by the window, exactly where the paramedics had left it. But upstairs, in the guest rooms Cora and Troy had claimed, I found a different world. A 70-inch television mounted on the wall, designer clothes hanging in the closet, tags from boutiques I'd never shop at, new laptops on the desk, Troy's expensive camera equipment lined up on shelves. I stood in that room for 5 minutes, doing math in my head. $1,800 a month for 36 months. $64,800 for care that never happened. I locked the house and drove back to the hospital. Blanche had been moved from ICU to a regular floor, her condition stable enough for the transfer. I met with her medical team, signed consent forms for extended treatment, asked detailed questions about prognosis and therapy schedules, establishing myself as the person making decisions now. I was reviewing paperwork at the nurse's station when a hospital administrator approached, a thin woman with careful eyes. "Mr. Gordon, I wanted to let you know we finally reached your daughter in France. She was very upset, said she's booking the first flight back. She kept asking to speak with you directly." I didn't look up from the form I was reading. "Tell her I'll be available through my attorney. She has Curtis Morrison's contact information if she needs anything regarding her mother's care." The administrator hesitated, then nodded and walked away. That evening, I stood in the quiet corridor outside Blanche's room. Other families passed by, carrying flowers, speaking in low voices. Normal people visiting their loved ones under normal circumstances. I held the manila envelope Curtis's paralegal had given me, my copy of the eviction notice. They'd serve it at the house tomorrow morning, 30 days starting the moment it was posted on the door. My phone buzzed. Unknown number with a Paris country code. I watched it ring, the screen glowing in my hand. It rang 8 times before going to voicemail, 3 seconds of silence. Then it started again. Same number. My thumb moved to the decline button and pressed down. The call started at 6 the next morning. Cora's number first, then Troy's, then international numbers I didn't recognize. I declined each one and silenced the phone, focusing on the guardianship documents Curtis had sent overnight for final review. By noon on June 18th, I'd received 43 calls. My voicemail filled up. I listened to one message just to confirm what I already knew. "Dad, please, I don't understand what's happening. The hospital says Mom is there. They won't tell me anything. You're not answering. I'm getting on a plane. Dad, please call me back. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. Just call me." Her voice carried that edge of panic she'd perfected as a teenager, the tone that used to make me cave on curfews and car payments. I deleted it and powered the phone off completely. Curtis called my office line that afternoon. "Process server confirmed. Notice posted at 0900 hours this morning. Photographed, documented, clocks running. Your daughter and her boyfriend have until July 17th. Good. Alan, she's calling my office too, 6 times in the last hour. Don't answer." He was quiet for a moment. "You're really doing this." "I really am." The next morning, June 19th, my phone showed 107 missed calls when I turned it back on. I scrolled through the log. Cora's number, Troy's number, numbers I didn't recognize. A few text messages I didn't open. I was meeting with Blanche's physical therapist when my phone vibrated with a call from the hospital's main line. "Mr. Gordon, this is Denise from Patient Services. Your daughter just arrived at the hospital with another individual. They're trying to access your ex-wife's room, but our records show the guardianship restriction. Did you want us to? I'll be there in 30 minutes. I took my time driving over. Let them sit with the reality for a while. When I walked into the consultation room, Cora looked like she'd been awake for 2 days straight. Probably had been. Her hair was pulled back messily, her eyes red-rimmed. Troy sat beside her, rumpled and hollow-eyed, wearing the same clothes from his Paris photos. A hospital social worker sat at the head of the table, her expression professionally neutral. Cora lunged toward me when I entered. The social worker stood, and I simply raised one hand. Everyone froze. I remained standing, opened the folder I'd brought, and placed it on the table. The Paris Post, printed in color. Timestamp circled in red ink. Medical reports showing the neglect timeline. Copy of the eviction notice. "Dad, I can explain. I thought you were coming back on the 16th. I was going to be home by then." My voice came out flat, prosecutorial. You left on the 10th. I was scheduled to return on the 16th. That's 6 days. You left your mother, who cannot walk, cannot speak, cannot feed herself, for 6 days, because you thought I'd be back in time to find her. It was supposed to be 5 days. I miscalculated by 1 day. It was a mistake. I slid the Paris Post across the polished wood. Finally, a break from those miserable old people. Your words. While your mother was dying of thirst in my living room. Troy picked up the eviction notice, his face going pale. What is this? An eviction notice? You can't be serious. 30 days, Arizona law. You've been living in my house under the pretense of providing care. That care was not provided. The arrangement is terminated. Cora's voice broke. Dad, please, you can't do this. Where are we supposed to go? I turned toward the door. You had enough money for Paris. Figure it out. The social worker tried to step in, her tone professionally soothing. Mr. Gordon, perhaps if we could discuss a family care plan. There is no family care plan. I am Blanche's guardian. These two are no longer welcome in my home or on this floor. If they need to communicate with me, they can go through my attorney. I handed Curtis's business card to the social worker and walked out. Cora tried to follow me into the hallway. Security appeared when I mentioned quietly to the floor nurse that she'd been banned from the patient area without my explicit permission. I didn't look back. An hour later, I stood at Blanche's bedside while she slept. The monitors beeped softly. Her color looked better than it had 3 days ago. The nurses said she'd squeezed someone's hand that morning. A small response, but a response. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen. Cora's number, call 108. I had declined it and turned the phone to silent. Outside in the parking lot, I knew Cora and Troy were standing beside a rental car, probably still trying to process what had just happened, trying to figure out their next move with 30 days on the clock and nowhere to go. I looked at Blanche's face, peaceful in medicated sleep, and felt nothing but cold certainty. This was just the beginning. 3 days after the hospital confrontation, I sat in Curtis's conference room reviewing the motion from Cora's attorney, Sharon Winters. Budget rate, standard letterhead, arguments so thin I could see through them. Curtis slid his reading glasses down his nose. She's claiming they had an understanding that they could live there permanently in exchange for care. That's her argument. They had an understanding that they'd provide actual care. They didn't. Do oral agreements count when one party completely fails to perform? Not in Arizona, especially not when the property owner can demonstrate fraud. They claim to be providing care, accepted money for providing care, and provably did not provide care. Her attorney is grasping. I'd reclaim my house the day after the hospital meeting, walk through it room by room, touching furniture I'd chosen, walls I'd painted, my space. I'd forgotten what that felt like. Curtis spread his own documents across the table. I'm recommending a countersuit. Fair market rent for a 4-bedroom home in that part of Scottsdale runs about $2,500 monthly. 36 months of occupancy. That's $90,000 you could have collected if they hadn't positioned themselves as caregivers. I did the math in my head, arrived at the same number. File it. Alan, you understand this will destroy any chance of reconciliation? There's nothing to reconcile. They made their choices. I'm making mine. He drafted while I watched, his fingers moving across the keyboard with professional efficiency. The legal language made it clean, clinical. Defendant failed to provide agreed-upon services. Plaintiff sustained financial damages. No mention of Blanche's cracked lips or the empty water bowl. The law didn't need those details. After the meeting, I drove to my bank. The manager recognized me. I'd been coming to this branch for 15 years. Mr. Gordon, I see this transfer has been running for 3 years. Just to confirm, you want it permanently canceled, not just paused. Permanently. The arrangement it was funding no longer exists. She typed for a moment, then handed me a form. I signed it with the same pen I'd used to set up the transfer originally. Found it in my jacket pocket, blue ink, slightly dried out. The symmetry felt appropriate. You'll receive confirmation via email within 24 hours. Thank you, Curtis called that afternoon. Adult Protective Services is opening a high-priority investigation. I spoke with Sarah Chen, their lead investigator. She's seen the medical reports and wants to interview Cora within the week. How long does that process typically take? 2 to 4 weeks from report to disposition. Given the evidence, I'd expect findings of substantiated neglect. That goes on a state registry, makes it difficult to work in healthcare, education, anything involving vulnerable populations. I made notes while he talked. Timelines, consequences, procedures. The prosecutor and me never really stopped working. 2 days later, Curtis forwarded me an email from Sharon Winters. Professional, but with an edge of desperation between the lines. Her client was confused about the countersuit. Perhaps we could all sit down and discuss a reasonable resolution. I called him instead of replying. What's reasonable about $90,000 in free housing? Her response, not mine. Want to hear something interesting? Sharon called my office 3 times today. Seems Cora received some additional mail. APS investigation notice. Bank notification about the canceled transfer. All at once. Within about 4 hours, according to Sharon. She asked if we could show some compassion for a young woman going through a difficult time. Young woman. Cora was 34, old enough to know better. What did you tell her? That my client's ex-wife nearly died from neglect, while said young woman vacationed in Europe. Compassion seems misplaced. That evening I sat in my home office going through bank statements, 3 years of them, printed and organized. I used a yellow highlighter to mark each transfer. $1,800, June 2022, July 2022, August 2022. The highlighter squeaked against paper, the sound rhythmic and oddly satisfying. Outside, I heard a lawn service at the neighbor's house. Normal suburban sounds I hadn't really noticed in 3 years. My phone sat face down on the desk, where I couldn't see the screen light up with blocked numbers trying to reach me. 1,800 times 36, $64,800. Just the care payments, not counting the market rate rent. I wrote a note in the margin of the final statement. Recommend amending countersuit to include care payments as additional damages. The stack of highlighted statements grew. I reached for my phone to email Curtis, then stopped. A car was pulling into my driveway. Through the window, I watched it park, but couldn't make out the driver through the glare on the windshield. The car idling in my driveway was Troy's rental sedan. I recognized the model from the airport lot sticker, still visible on the back window. He sat there for 3 full minutes before finally opening the door and walking toward my house. I met him at the front door, but didn't open it fully. Stayed in the doorway with the air conditioning at my back while he stood in the July heat. Alan, can we talk? I know things got heated at the hospital. Maybe we can work something out, Dad, too. Look, man to man. I'm not your dad, and there's nothing to work out. You received an eviction notice. You have until the 19th of July. He shifted his weight, sweat already darkening his collar. Come on. You know Cora made a mistake. She knows it too. But $90,000? An APS investigation? This is destroying us. We'll move out. We'll apologize. Just drop the lawsuits. Let us start over. Start over. Interesting phrase. Did Blanche get to start over after 5 days without water? His jaw tightened. Look, I know you're angry. You have every right. But Cora's your daughter. She messed up, but she's family. Doesn't that count for something? Family. She used that word too when she moved in. Said, family takes care of family. Then she took a vacation while her mother dehydrated. So, no, Troy. Right now that word doesn't count for much. He pulled out his phone, started scrolling. We've been looking at apartments. We're trying to comply. We just need time. I didn't look at his screen, kept my eyes on his face instead. I'll consider a discussion under 3 conditions. 1, public acknowledgement of what happened to Blanche. 2, written apology. 3, payment plan for her medical expenses. $11,200 so far. You meet those conditions, we can talk about the rest. Public acknowledgement? You want her to humiliate herself? I want honesty. She had no problem posting publicly from Paris. She can post publicly about why she came home. He stood there for another minute, maybe hoping I'd soften. I didn't move. Eventually, he walked back to his car. I called Curtis after Troy left. He came to my house, tried to negotiate. Alan, I need you to be careful. Document everything. Don't meet with either of them without a witness. He was no threat, just desperate. Desperate people are exactly the threat. What did you tell him? My conditions. Public apology, acknowledgement of neglect, payment plan for medical bills. Then we talk. Curtis sighed. You know they can't meet those conditions. Cora would never post a public apology. I know. That evening, my cousin Denise texted me a screenshot. Cora's social media post, lengthy and emotional. Sometimes the people who should protect you become your greatest source of pain. My father has chosen legal warfare over family. Over one mistake, one miscalculation. He's trying to destroy his own daughter's life. To everyone dealing with harsh parents who can't forgive, I see you. We're not alone. I forwarded it to Curtis with a note. For the file, demonstrates continued dishonesty. The post accumulated sympathetic comments. People I didn't know, offering support, sharing their own stories of difficult family relationships. For about 3 hours, Cora's narrative held. Then someone found the Paris post. I watched it happen in real time as people sent me screenshots. Someone shared a side-by-side comparison. Cora's harsh father post next to the Eiffel Tower photo, with its caption about miserable old people. The comments shifted. Wait, aren't you the one who posted about taking a break from miserable old people while in Paris? Didn't your mom end up in the hospital? Miscalculation? You left your disabled mother alone for 6 days. That's not a miscalculation, that's neglect. Playing victim on social media when screenshots exist is bold. Google exists, Cora. Within an hour, the post was gone, deleted. But the screenshots kept circulating. I received an email that evening from Martinez, an old colleague from my prosecutor days. Subject line, saw the mess with your daughter. Sorry you're dealing with this. The message was brief. Alan, someone forwarded me your daughter's social media drama. I looked up the case. Hospital report, APS investigation, the whole thing. Just wanted you to know, you're doing the right thing. Some of us remember cases we worked where family members exploited elders. You're stopping it. That's not cruelty. That's protection. Martinez. I read it twice. I wasn't looking for validation, hadn't expected it. But something in my chest loosened slightly. I closed the email and picked up my phone, opened my blocked calls list. 17 attempts from Cora today alone. None of them had rung through. My thumb hovered over the unblock option. I set the phone down without changing anything and stood up, walked to the kitchen where Blanche's wheelchair still sat in the corner, exactly where the paramedics had left it that day. I hadn't moved it yet, would eventually, just not tonight. The Adult Protective Services investigators arrived at Cora's motel mid-morning on July 15th. I knew because Curtis texted me the schedule. They'd interview her first, then come to my house that afternoon. I spent the morning setting up my dining room like I used to prepare case presentations. Medical reports in chronological order on the left, enlarged photographs of the scene in the center, timeline chart on the right, USB drive with security footage labeled and ready. 30 years of building cases hadn't left me. Sarah Chen and Mark Rodriguez arrived at 2 o'clock. Professional handshakes, business cards exchanged, tablets and folders that meant this was serious work. Mr. Gordon, we appreciate you making time for us. I've organized everything chronologically. Medical records from her hospital admission are here. Note the attending physician's assessment of 4 to 5 days without adequate hydration or care. Photos I took when I found her are in this folder. Security footage is queued to the relevant dates. Sarah Chen moved along the table, photographing my evidence layout with her department tablet. This camera covers your front entrance? Installed 3 years ago, motion-activated continuous recording. The timestamp is verified. It syncs with my security system's master clock. I opened my laptop and played the footage. June 10th, 6:47 a.m. Cora appeared first, checking her phone and smiling. Troy followed with 2 large suitcases, another trip for carry-ons. They loaded everything into their car with the casual ease of people heading on vacation. Troy locked the front door. Cora said something that made him laugh. They drove away. Inside that house, Blanche sat in her wheelchair, unable to walk, unable to call for help, unable to reach the food stocked in the refrigerator 6 feet away. Sarah Chen watched the footage 3 times. Mark Rodriguez typed rapidly, his fingers never stopping. And this shows your daughter and son-in-law departing June 10th with luggage? Correct. You can see they're packed for travel. They returned June 19th after I'd already found Blanche and had her hospitalized. Mark flipped through the medical reports. These pressure ulcers are consistent with immobility, without position changes for several days. The dehydration markers in the blood work support the timeline. The ER doctor documented everything. His professional opinion is in the report. Minimum 4 days of complete neglect. Sarah Chen examined the photographs I had taken. The empty water bowl, the crusted food. Blanche slumped and barely conscious. Professional as she was, something in her expression tightened. Mr. Gordon, what was your understanding of the care arrangement? They moved into my house specifically to provide care for my ex-wife. I was paying $1,800 monthly for care expenses. I thought Blanche was being properly supervised. I was wrong. You were still financially supporting Ms. Gordon's care, even though you're divorced? Blanche is the mother of my daughter. She needed help. I provided it, or tried to. They stayed for 2 hours, took copies of everything, asked questions I answered precisely. When they left, Sarah Chen's goodbye was formal, but her eyes held something I recognized from my own days prosecuting elder abuse cases. She'd seen enough. Curtis called that evening. Alan, the supplementary filing is with the court. I incorporated the APS investigation as evidence of bad faith and breach of the care agreement. The judge will see that they weren't just non-paying occupants, they were fraudulent occupants who gained entry under false pretenses. Will that matter for the eviction? It makes it bulletproof. They can't claim any equitable interest in the property when they obtained residency through misrepresentation, and then violated the core term of the arrangement. After the call, I sat in the living room where I'd found Blanche a month ago. The wheelchair was gone, moved to the care facility where she was slowly recovering. The space felt empty, but clean. My phone sat dark on the coffee table. No calls from Cora today. Maybe she was finally accepting reality. Or maybe she was too busy packing. The eviction was in 4 days. I'd already been through the house, identified what belonged to them, separated it from my own belongings. Efficient, clinical, the way I used to process evidence rooms. My laptop showed Curtis's email. Court filing complete. Eviction proceeds as scheduled. APS indicated their report will be ready within 2 weeks. I closed the laptop. Should have felt something. Victory, satisfaction, regret. Mostly I felt tired. I walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. Normal suburban night. Tomorrow I'd start preparing for eviction day. Tonight, I just stood there, looking at nothing in particular, waiting for whatever came next. Deputy Martinez arrived at exactly 10 in the morning on July 19th. I opened the door before he knocked, handed him the court order and proof of service in a folder. Mr. Gordon, I'm Deputy Martinez. I'm here to enforce the eviction order for Cora Shaw and Troy Shaw. Are the respondents currently on the premises? They're inside. They were notified this would happen today at 10. Here's everything you need. He reviewed the documents, nodded approvingly. Everything looks in order. I'll need you to remain available, but please let me handle contact with the respondents. This is a civil matter, and we want to keep it that way. I stepped back and let him do his job. Inside, I heard his knock. Cora's voice, high and strained, then Troy's, lower and resigned. The deputy's calm, professional tone explaining they had until 1 p.m. to clear the property. Through the window, I watched them carry boxes to the curb. A rental truck waited, driven by Troy's cousin. Furniture next, their bed frame, Troy's desk, the cheap couch they'd bought. 3 years of accumulation loaded piece by piece while neighbors pretended not to stare. Cora tried to approach during a water break. Deputy Martinez intercepted smoothly. Ma'am, I'd advise against it. This is a legal proceeding. Any communication should go through attorneys. She shouted toward the house anyway. Dad, please, where are we supposed to go? I stood at the window but didn't move, didn't answer. Ma'am, You need to focus on removing your belongings. During one trip, Cora dropped a framed photo. It shattered on the driveway. Her childhood picture, maybe 7 years old, smiling in a park somewhere. She knelt to pick up the pieces and started crying. I felt something then. Brief ache, old muscle memory of being a father. But that child was gone. Had been for a long time. At 12:45, Troy carried the last box to the truck. Deputy Martinez walked them to their vehicle. Cora climbed into the passenger seat without looking back. Keys were surrendered. The deputy handed them to me. My locksmith pulled up 2 minutes later, tools already organized. I'd called him yesterday, scheduled him for 1 p.m. He had the locks rekeyed in 40 minutes. Fresh keys in my palm, my house, mine alone. I walked through each room after everyone left. Guest room where Troy had his office, empty now. Bedroom where Cora slept, bare mattress she couldn't fit in the truck. I'd dispose of it tomorrow. Living room where Blanche's wheelchair had sat. That corner still felt occupied somehow. I photographed each room, documented nail holes, carpet wear, minor damage, more evidence collection. Habits never die. That afternoon, I drove to the care facility, found Blanche in the courtyard, afternoon sun warming the patio, sat beside her and talked more than usual. The house is mine again, just me now, quiet. I forgot how quiet it used to be. I'm going to paint the guest room, maybe blue. You always liked blue. She made a small sound, squeezed my hand weakly. The stroke had taken so much, but the therapist said she was improving. Eating more, responding to stimulus. The doctor says you're doing better. That's good. That's really good. I stayed an hour, helped a nurse feed her dinner, watched her fall asleep in the sun. Curtis's voicemail was waiting when I got to my car. Alan, eviction complete? Good. Next is the countersuit hearing in August. They haven't responded to settlement overtures, so we're proceeding. Also, APS preliminary finding came through. Substantiated neglect. No criminal charges recommended, but on record permanently. Blanche's condition saved them from worse. Call me Monday. Back home that evening, I stood in my kitchen. The locksmith's fresh keys sat on the counter. 3 new copies, shiny and unscratched. I picked one up, felt its weight. For 3 years, other people had keys to my home. Now, it was mine alone again. I opened the refrigerator, took out a beer I'd bought yesterday, twisted the cap, but didn't drink immediately. Just held the cold bottle and looked out the window at my backyard. Mesquite trees dark against the evening sky. Cicadas starting their night song. Normal summer evening in Arizona. My house, my rules, my life. I raised the bottle halfway to my lips and caught my reflection in the darkening glass. Older than I remembered, harder than I used to be, but still standing. The countersuit hearing was in August. I'd be ready. The guardianship hearing took less than 20 minutes. Judge Patterson reviewed the medical reports, the APS findings, my emergency contact designation, asked if Cora wanted to contest. Sharon Winters, her budget attorney, shook her head. No, Your Honor, we don't contest. Very well. Guardianship is granted, Mr. Gordon. Do you understand the responsibilities this entails? I do, Your Honor. I've already arranged placement at a licensed care facility and will ensure she receives appropriate medical attention and quality of life. She signed the order. Permanent guardianship. Exclusive legal authority over Blanche's care and medical decisions. Everything Cora should have been doing for 3 years. Now, legally mine alone. The court clerk handed me certified copies. I walked outside into August heat that hit like a physical wall. Curtis met me on the courthouse steps. Congratulations. That was about as smooth as these things get. Because there was nothing to contest. The evidence was overwhelming. Still, you've got full authority now. No one can second-guess your decisions about her care. I folded the papers carefully, tucked them into my portfolio. Good, because I'm moving her to Sunrise Care tomorrow. That afternoon, I toured the facility with Carol Chen, the director. She was precise, professional, the kind of person who ran things properly. She showed me the physical therapy room with its parallel bars and resistance equipment, the memory care wing with its secure doors and soft lighting, the courtyard with shade structures designed for Arizona summers. "We focus on dignity and quality of life," she explained. "Many of our residents have limited mobility or communication, but we treat everyone as individuals with preferences and personalities. What's your staff overnight ratio? 1 nurse to 8 residents overnight, 2 to 10 during day shifts. We also have physical therapy 3 times weekly, occupational therapy twice weekly, and a full-time activities coordinator." I made mental notes, compared it to the research I'd done online, the other facilities I'd visited. This one felt right, clean but not sterile, professional but not cold. "When can she be admitted?" "We can receive her as early as tomorrow. The monthly rate is $4,500, first and last month required." "That's acceptable." I wrote the check that evening at my kitchen table. $9,000, 2 months placement. Worth every penny to know she'd be safe, cared for, treated with dignity. 2 days later, I followed the medical transport van to Sunrise Care, my hands steady on the wheel. Watched as they transferred Blanche from the van to a wheelchair, gentle and efficient. I carried her small bag myself. Wouldn't trust it to anyone else. Photo album with pictures from before the stroke. Her preferred blanket, soft blue fleece. Reading glasses she couldn't use anymore, but liked having nearby. Said they made her feel normal. I set up her room with deliberate care. Positioned the bed so she could see out the window. Placed the photo album on the nightstand where she could reach it if she wanted. Hung her robe on the hook by the bathroom. Small things that made it hers. Carol found me adjusting the curtains. "She's settled in the common area if you'd like to say goodbye for today. I'll visit tomorrow and the day after, every day." That's wonderful. Consistent visitation helps with adjustment tremendously. Cora received a formal letter that week. Professional letterhead, legal language. Visitation requests for Blanche Gordon must be approved by legal guardian Alan Gordon. Contact Curtis Morrison's office for all inquiries. I imagined her reading it, that moment when she realized she needed permission to see her own mother. Good. Let her feel what powerlessness tastes like. She called Margaret Reynolds from church, begging for intervention. I knew because Margaret called me 3 days later while I was painting the guest room, Troy's old room, a calm blue, Blanche's favorite color, covering the nail holes where his motivational posters had hung, erasing him. "Alan, it's Margaret Reynolds. I'm calling about Cora. She came to me in tears. She's struggling. I know there's been a terrible situation, but she's your daughter. Isn't there some way to resolve this without destroying her life?" I set my brush down carefully, wiped my hands on a rag. "Margaret, I appreciate the call, but this matter is in my attorney's hands. Curtis Morrison. If Cora wants to discuss settlement, she needs to provide written acknowledgement of what happened and reimbursement for Blanche's medical expenses. $15,000. Alan, be reasonable. They don't have $15,000. They can barely make rent. I've seen their apartment. It's tiny in a rough neighborhood. Troy's working retail. They're barely surviving. They had money for Paris. They had money to live rent-free in my house for 3 years while I paid them $1,800 a month. They'll figure it out." Margaret's voice softened, trying a different approach. "I understand you're hurt. You have every right to be. But this is your daughter. Your only child. Is this really how you want things to end? This is your daughter. My daughter left her mother to die. Some things don't get forgiven just because we share DNA." Silence on the line. Then Margaret sighed. "I'll pray for your family, Alan." "You do that." I ended the call, picked up my brush, returned to painting. Steady strokes. Even coverage. Transforming the space. Curtis called later that week. "They tried to reach out through that church friend. You handled it correctly. All settlement talks through me. But Alan, they're going to claim inability to pay at the hearing. The judge might reduce the amount or set minimal payments. Then we set minimal payments, $500 a month. It'll take years, but they'll pay every month and remember why." A pause. "That's vindictive. That's accountability. 30 months of payments, Curtis. 30 months of being reminded what they did, what it cost. $500 leaving their account on the first of every month. Every single month. All right, I'll prepare for that contingency. The hearing's in 2 weeks. I'll be ready. I visited Blanche every afternoon, established a routine, 2 o'clock after lunch, before the evening activities started. Found her in different places, sometimes in her room, sometimes in the common area, once in the physical therapy room, working with a therapist on arm exercises. 2 weeks after her admission, I found her in the courtyard during activities hour. A care assistant was reading aloud to a small group, some mystery novel, voices animated for different characters. Blanche sat in dappled shade, eyes half closed, peaceful. She saw me approach and her face brightened. One of the few expressions she could still make clearly. That recognition, that gladness, it loosened something in my chest. I sat beside her on the bench, took her hand. Her fingers curled around mine, grip weak but present. "You look good. They're taking care of you." She made a small sound. Agreement maybe, or just acknowledging my voice. Another resident's family visited nearby. 3 generations, grandmother in a wheelchair, middle-aged daughter, 2 grandkids, maybe 8 and 10. The kids showed their grandmother drawings from school. The daughter held her hand. Everyone talking at once, laughing, taking photos. Normal family moments. We watched them quietly. Blanche's thumb moved slightly against my palm. I squeezed her hand gently. The assistant finished her chapter. "Anyone want cookies? We have chocolate chip and oatmeal raisin." Blanche looked at me. Question in her eyes. I nodded permission. "Chocolate chip." She likes chocolate chip. The assistant smiled and wheeled her toward the activities room with the others. I stayed on the bench, watching her go, watching the staff treat her with dignity and patience, watching her be part of something, cared for properly. My phone buzzed against my hip. Text from Curtis. Hearing confirmed August 28th, 9 a.m., Judge Patterson's courtroom. Final settlement offer from their attorney. They'll pay $5,000 total, no admission of wrongdoing. Your response? I typed back, "Declined, see you in court." Deleted the message thread. Looked up at the cloudless desert sky, that hard blue that meant August in Arizona. 2 weeks until the hearing. Then this phase ended. One way or another, Judge Patterson called the courtroom to order at 9:15 on August 28th. Cora and Troy had arrived 10 minutes late, Sharon Winters apologizing breathlessly as they slid into seats behind the defense table. I'd been there since 8:30, sitting beside Curtis at counsel table, my leather portfolio precisely aligned with the table edge. I'd worn my only suit, dark gray, the same one from my retirement ceremony 4 years ago. Fit a little looser now. I'd lost weight over the summer. Stress will do that, though I never felt stressed, just focused. This case arises from eviction proceedings related to allegations of elder neglect. Mr. Gordon, through counsel, is seeking compensation for unpaid housing costs and medical expenses. Ms. Shaw and Mr. Shaw are the respondents. Let's proceed. Mr. Morrison. Curtis stood, buttoned his jacket. Methodical. Professional. Exactly the way we'd rehearsed 3 times in his office. Your Honor, my client Alan Gordon provided housing to his daughter and son-in-law for 3 years, under the explicit understanding they would care for his ex-wife, Blanche Gordon, a stroke patient requiring constant supervision. Not only did they fail to provide this care, they abandoned her completely for 6 days while vacationing in Paris, resulting in life-threatening dehydration and neglect. He walked the judge through the timeline, dates, medical reports, financial records, built the case brick by brick the way I'd taught younger prosecutors decades ago. Foundation first, then evidence, then conclusion. When he cued the security footage, the courtroom screen flickered to life. June 10th, 6:47 a.m. There was Cora, phone in hand, smiling at something on the screen. Troy appeared with the first suitcase, then another trip. Carry-on bags. Everything loaded with the casual ease of people heading on vacation. I didn't watch the screen, watched Cora's face instead. Saw her flinch when her past self appeared so cheerful, so unburdened. Saw Troy's jaw muscle jump when the timestamp appeared in the corner. 6 days before my scheduled return. 6 days Blanche would be alone. Curtis froze the frame. This is them leaving, Your Honor. The house behind them contains Blanche Gordon, who cannot walk, cannot reach food or water without assistance, cannot call for help. Sharon Winters objected weakly. Your Honor, my clients have acknowledged an error in judgment. An error? Curtis turned. This wasn't forgetting to water a plant. This was abandoning a vulnerable human being. Judge Patterson raised her hand. Mr. Morrison, I've seen the evidence. Ms. Winters, your response? Sharon stood, and I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. She'd taken a bad case and was doing her best with nothing. Your Honor, my clients acknowledge a serious error in judgment occurred. However, they've already suffered significant consequences. Loss of housing, loss of income, damaged reputation. They're barely surviving on minimum wage employment. The requested amounts would be financially ruinous. Judge Patterson leaned forward slightly. Ms. Winters, your clients lived rent-free in a valuable property for 3 years. That's substantial financial benefit. They also received monthly payments designated for care expenses. What care did they actually provide? They provided care for 2 years, Your Honor. This was one incident that nearly killed someone. The judge's voice sharpened. I've read the medical reports. 4 to 5 days without adequate water or care for a wheelchair-bound stroke patient. That's not an incident. That's neglect. Continue, Mr. Morrison. Curtis pulled out another document. Your Honor, I'd like to enter the Adult Protective Services investigation conclusion into the record. Go ahead. He read it slowly, clearly. Case 2025-06-1847. Finding: substantiated neglect. The evidence supports that Blanche Gordon, a vulnerable adult with significant care needs, was left without appropriate supervision or care for approximately 5 days, resulting in medical emergency and hospitalization. Contributing factors include caregiver absence without adequate alternative arrangements. The words hung in the courtroom air. Official, permanent, true. Judge Patterson turned to Cora and Troy. Do either of you wish to make a statement? Cora stood, hands trembling. I made a terrible mistake. I thought Dad was coming back earlier. I miscalculated the dates. I would never intentionally hurt my mother. I love her. I'm so sorry. Her voice broke. We can't afford what he's asking. We're trying, but we just can't. Please. Troy stood beside her. We're willing to make reasonable payments, but $15,000 we'll be paying forever. Judge Patterson picked up her pen, wrote something on her notes, looked up. You'll be paying for 30 months, which is considerably less time than you lived in Mr. Gordon's house without contributing financially. Here's my ruling. She read from her notes, voice clear and final. The respondents will pay $15,000 in restitution for medical expenses at a rate of $500 monthly for 30 months. They will also pay $8,000 for Mr. Gordon's legal fees within 90 days, or be subject to wage garnishment. The APS finding of substantiated neglect is entered into this case record as a matter of public documentation. Cora gasped, put her hand over her mouth. This is a civil matter. No criminal charges are being pursued. But let me be clear, this was serious. You endangered someone who couldn't protect herself, someone who trusted you. That breach of trust has consequences. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. Sharp crack that echoed. I stood, shook Curtis's hand. Thank you. You're welcome. Justice served. I thanked the judge with a respectful nod and walked toward the courtroom doors. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor, steady and even. Behind me, Cora's voice. Dad! Dad! Please! Curtis intercepted. Ms. Shaw, no contact. Everything through attorneys. I pushed through the doors into the hallway, kept walking. Sharon Winters caught up to Cora and Troy by the elevators. I heard fragments as I passed. Payment schedule, first payment due, I'm sorry, the evidence. Outside, the August heat hit like opening an oven door. I walked to my car, started the engine, let the AC run for a minute before pulling out. Traffic was light mid-morning, made good time to sunrise care, found Blanche in her room. The afternoon light came through the window softly, filtered by the shade screen. She was sitting up in her specialized chair, the one that supported her weak side properly. Hey, I said, pulling up the visitor chair. The hearing happened. It's over. You'll keep getting care, good care, always. I promised you that. I'm keeping it. She squeezed my hand, made a soft sound in her throat. The most communication she could manage, but it was enough. I repainted the guest room blue. Remember, you always wanted the guest room blue? Looks good, peaceful. House feels different now. Mine again. Quiet. Her eyes focused on my face, held there. Something passed between us, understanding maybe, gratitude, connection that didn't need words. I know, I said after a long pause. Me too. I stayed an hour, helped when they brought her afternoon snack, cranberry juice and graham crackers. She managed the juice through a straw, slow but steady. Progress. When I left, the care assistant walked me to the door. She's doing really well, Mr. Gordon. The consistency of your visits helps tremendously. I'll be back tomorrow. We know. She lights up when we tell her you're coming. That evening, I sat on my back patio with coffee, watched the sunset paint the sky, orange and purple and deep red, colors I'd forgotten to notice during the years Cora and Troy occupied my space, filling it with their noise and needs and neglect. My phone rang once. Curtis? Well, we won. Complete victory. You should feel satisfied. I feel tired. That's reasonable. It's been a long summer. Will you reconcile with Cora eventually? People do forgive, given time. I watched a hawk circle overhead, hunting. I don't know. Maybe years from now. Maybe never. She chose Paris over her mother's life, posted about it publicly, smiled while loading her luggage. I can't unknow that. Fair enough? You've got the payment schedule. First payment due September 1st. They'll make it or face garnishment. Good. Get some rest, Alan. You earned it. After the call, I sat there as darkness fell. The coffee went cold in my cup, but I didn't move. Stars appeared, more visible here in the desert than in most places. The light pollution from downtown Phoenix was just a distant glow on the horizon. My phone stayed dark. No calls from Cora, no texts, no voicemails begging for mercy. She had my attorney's information if she ever wanted to discuss visiting her mother. If she ever found the humility for a real apology, not the courtroom performance. I wasn't holding my breath. The payments would come monthly. $500. First of every month for 30 months. Automatic withdrawal from their account. Curtis had arranged it. $500 leaving their account while I visited Blanche, while I repainted rooms, while I lived my life in peace. 30 months of being reminded that actions have consequences, that vulnerable people matter, that justice, when you work for it methodically and without compromise, can actually be achieved. A coyote called somewhere in the darkness. Long, rising howl. Another answered from a different direction, then a third. The desert belonged to them at night, to creatures who survive by being smart, careful, unforgiving of mistakes. I understood that now in ways I hadn't before this summer. I stood, picked up my empty cup, went inside and locked the door, my house, my life. The lights went off one by one as I moved through the rooms. Kitchen dark, living room dark, hallway dark. Just the porch light remained, burning steady in the Arizona night. A marker that someone lived here, really lived here. That was enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching.